All right. Hello, everyone. Hi, Diane.
Hey.
Welcome to this week's edition of Justice HQ's Think Tank. If you are looking for tangible tips to grow your practice and the mindset you're going to need to do it, please hit subscribe. I post a new video every week where I interview a lawyer who has successfully implemented the strategies they're going to talk to you about to grow their own practice. This week, we have Diane Chang from the law offices of Diane Chang. And for those of you who are not familiar with her, you can reach her at Diane, or you tell me, Diane, because I think I just got that wrong already.
It's Diane, D-I-A-N-E, at Diane Chang, C-H-A-N-G, law.com.
Awesome. And I am Ashley Lakin from Lakin Law Group. I can be reached at ashley@lakinlaw.com. This week is going to be a little bit different, a little interesting. I struggled with what I was going to say on this topic all of last night and all of this morning and how in depth I was going to get. And I'm so glad to have Diane on because I don't know how many of you know about my relationship with Diane. Diane has an office in Redondo Beach. I sublet one of the offices in Diane's office, so we are around each other a lot. We are also friends. And to say that the pandemic has been difficult on me would be an understatement. I don't talk to a lot of people that I'm not, very close to about it. But Diane played a very pivotal role in helping me get through what I was struggling with because when this was happening, I really started searching for answers on how I could deal with the struggles of being a single parent, of running a practice, feeling feeling a lot overwhelmed, dealing with the virtual learning with the kids. My daughter was struggling with virtual learning. She was starting to get D's and F's. She was also having some struggles with the other parent in my co-parenting relationship, which prompted me to become embroiled in a very heated custody battle. So to say a lot of shit was going on would, again, be an understatement. But I ended up having basically 2 breakdowns in the pandemic. And Diane gave me a list of books that I should start researching, I think even before she even knew exactly what was going on. And I started basically devouring the books, not just on Audible, but also for those that I really felt like I needed to take notes on so I could really absorb what it was telling me. I also got the hardback books. And some of them I actually read 2 or 3 times, whether it be on Audible or hardback. I was really looking for an answer because I was struggling with, can I do it all? And I know a lot of you are aware that a lot of lawyers have actually left the legal practice because of the demands of running their own firms and being a parent. For those of you who are parents, I'm sure you're familiar with the issue of being in the house physically, but my son likes to interrupt me every 10 minutes, including when I'm on the phone. My daughter, I had to be very careful with because I wasn't sure if she was actually on her Zoom class or whether she had turned the camera off and muted herself, which I guess is the 2020 version of ditching class. So fortunately, I was able to get a lot of that worked out. She's doing just fine. She's now getting A's and B's in her classes and we got our grades up, but it took a huge toll on me and really made me question whether I could do it all, whether I was cut out to own my own practice, whether I was, I felt like I had to choose between being a good lawyer or being a good mom. I was suffering from a lot of guilt because, on the nights I had deadlines, I would be sitting on the couch on my laptop until 10, 11, 12 at night, and the kids were complaining that I was working too much and that I wasn't paying attention to them, all of those things. But the way that I have gotten through it, and I would say that I got through it even better on the back end was because I had started researching so much about self-development, about manifestation, about the law of attraction, about controlling your thoughts. I struggled with imposter syndrome, wondering if, I was really cut out to run a business, all of it. And Diane would be the absolute perfect person to talk about why mindset matters. And I know you guys have heard me talk about it a lot. Some of you have grown like, oh, I'll do that on another day. But it matters. Like, I really don't think I could do one without the other. And I probably wouldn't have delved so far into it if it wasn't for Diane's guidance. So maybe, Diane, you could share a little bit about yourself and how you got started on that journey.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing, Ashley. It's really been a pleasure getting to know Ashley. And one of the things I love the most about her is that she's not afraid to be vulnerable and she's not afraid to be raw. And I think those are some of the really valuable keys to having a colorful and fulfilled life. There is one author and speaker who I would recommend that you look into. Her name is Brené Brown, and she talks about the power of vulnerability. And I think that during this COVID pandemic, a lot of people have emotions and feelings that are bottled up, and perhaps they don't feel so comfortable talking about it. And that's an absolutely natural reaction. But I think during times like this, it's when a supportive community is absolutely critical to overcoming hardship and allowing yourself to be vulnerable with trusted people. So I love the fact that, we've met other like-minded attorneys through JHQ, and this has been an avenue for us to find people to be vulnerable with and to make new friendships and connections. So a little bit about myself. I'm a single mom. I have an 11-year-old son. Right now, he's with my mom. She lives in Redondo Beach. I live in Palos Verdes. So she's been there to help me out. It hasn't been without complications. When the pandemic first hit, I was basically homebound with my son for maybe 5-6 months. And I never left, even though I had just gotten a new office. And I was hoping to have it ready to go and, open practice sometime in like March 2020. And that just did not happen, obviously. So there were times when I was stuck at home thinking to myself, oh my God, I made a huge mistake. What did I do? But rather than focus on the negative, I decided to see what was right in front of me. And that was the fact that I was able to spend more time with my son. I learned more about my son, including there was one incident where I was about ready to go to bed. I thought he was in bed way earlier because he usually goes to bed around 9. And I was getting these alerts on my phone at like midnight saying that there might be like fraudulent purchases made on my credit card. And I'm like, what? That's so bizarre. And I was getting all these text alerts. And I was like, well, for sure, my son is asleep in his room somewhere, so it can't be him. And these alerts kept coming. So I decided I'm just going to check on him. So I go into his bedroom and he's like pretending to be asleep. And I'm like, Julian? And he was like, uh-huh. And like his response was way too awake. So it totally gave up the fact that he was awake. And I asked him if he was making purchases on the iPad that I had purchased for him during this COVID remote learning period. And he was like, no, I don't know what you're talking about. Finally, I pulled it out of him that he was buying, I don't know exactly what, but he was playing Minecraft, and you can buy like credits or you can buy, things to help you advance in that game. I don't know what it was, but ultimately it came down to the fact that he had made $400 in purchases within like 10 minutes for Minecraft. And I was livid. Like I was more upset with the fact that he lied to me. But afterward, I felt like a total failure as a mother. And he's a generally, good kid who doesn't typically break rules. So I was just shocked and I felt like, oh my God, what's going on with my child? I suck as a mother. I'm not supervising him. Like, has he been doing this every night where I think he's in bed sleeping, but he's actually up doing who knows what? So, I mean, I had kind of like a come to Jesus moment where I had to forgive my son, first of all, and forgive myself for letting that slip through the cracks and for not being a little bit more careful with the iPad that I had given him to use because it had my credit card information saved on there through, I guess, Apple. Anyway, those are some of the challenges that I had to face. And I do co-parent a little bit, but it was pretty much just me during the entire pandemic period. And it was very hard for him to understand why he couldn't see other people, why it was risky. But eventually over the summer, my mom was available to help out with his education. And I felt that it was just a lot more useful to have her be able to supervise him during his remote learning. So if there's something that I could, share with that is that, if you feel like you need help, don't be afraid to ask for it because we're all on the same boat. And, Ashley and I share an office together. So, we've both brought our kids to the office and we have to make some changes with regard to that. But ultimately, I think it's actually a really good experience for our kids to come with us to the office from time to time.
Actually, well, I bring mine a heck of a lot yours, more than you bring yours. I wanted to bring my daughter until I realized that she has second period violin. And she pulled the violin out in the conference room and I was like, oh, you can't play violin in here. And that led me to something else because not only was she with me every day, and then I get notice of her attendance, and I think she missed like 16 days in 1 month, and I was like, holy hell. And this is when I was trusting her to be at home alone. So I enrolled her in a socially distanced YMCA program that was $1,000 a month until I found out that there were other kids that were running amok in the background and distracting her from her afternoon class. And then I was like, oh my God, I have no options.
Right.
Which led me to do something that is very uncomfortable for me to do because I have, superwoman complex, and I had to call my mom and say, Mom, I need some help. I can't run the firm, work on my cases and take care of both of them. You've got to take one of them. And she now will go up to my mom's most days. Some days it doesn't work out and she has to be home. But my son, who is 9, absolutely under no circumstance can he be left alone, nor would I do that. So I bring him to the office. I sit in the conference room. He sits in the office that I sublet. It's great, Diane, because you built the office with glass. So I'm like, Cody, I can, see when he's messing around. And the second thing that you mentioned was you had to forgive yourself. So I know, at least for me, I reached a point during the second breakdown where, I had to think, I don't have the choice to leave the law. And this is my reality. My kids are virtually learning. And the reason for the second breakdown actually was because I got the second text message alert that their return to school date had been again extended. And when I got that text, I was in my backyard and I literally sat down and just started bawling. I was like, what am I going to do? And then I thought, you know what? This is it. This is my reality. So either I can continue to be frustrated about the things that I cannot control, or I can figure out how to not only get in control, because the biggest thing for me, I don't know about the rest of you, but the biggest thing for me was overwhelm. I can't deal with all of this. How am I going to do all of this? How am I going to be a good mom and be a good lawyer and stay on top of my cases and make sure my daughter is actually going to class without physically putting her next to me? Like, how do I do? And my daughter was also suffering from a trauma at the time. So I was like, how do I take care of her, myself, my son, my business? It was just so much. So instead of trying to be perfect at everything, I cut myself some slack. And I told the kids, yeah, I got to work until 10, 11, 12 tonight. But tomorrow night's going to be movie night. And, when my ex-partner was like, oh, look, you're totally failing as a mom. You can't even make sure your kid is going to class. I put up a wall. Like nothing that person could say could penetrate through that wall. I was like, you know what? And I had to forgive myself for the fact that I didn't notice that for like a month, because in school, my daughter was extraordinarily responsible. I had no idea that she was capable of this. But then I come to find out that a lot of kids were going through this. And this was something that was really a problem for a lot of parents. So I had to cut myself some slack. Okay, Ash, this doesn't make you a bad parent. How are you going to fix it? And I started asking for help. I started cutting myself some slack. And the other thing I had to do, which I know you know a lot about, Diane, was I had to get in control of the thoughts that were rolling through my head. So every time I had a thought come through that was like, there's no way you can do this, I'm like, nope, we're going to change that thought.
Yeah. And something else I wanted to add to your story about, someone being critical of your parenting. I was actually just talking to Jake Finkel about this over the phone, but like we talked about how you have to not take things personally, because who knows what, someone else who's criticizing you, what they're going through. And
Right.
they may just very well be reacting to a negative state of mind that they're currently in. And that's something that right. And that's something that we have to learn when it comes to dealing with opposing counsel, so you may have a visceral, knee-jerk reaction to react out of anger, but you have to understand that you can't take things personally. You don't know what they're going through. You don't know what their opinion of you is, and it honestly doesn't matter. And I had mentioned this book with Jake. It's called The Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz.
So good. So good.
Yes. And it talks about not taking things personally, because you just have no idea what's going on in the mind of another party. And therefore, there's literally no reason to take that to heart.
It also talks about not assuming anything. If you don't know whether it's personal or whatnot, you have to ask. You have to communicate. You can't make assumptions. But when you said, especially with opposing counsel, I had an attorney that was just awful to me. I posted about it on Slack. I'd even posted a communication exchange we had. And I had a little kumbaya conversation with him a couple weeks ago where I was like, dude, you can't practice law this way. Like, you can't be unprofessional. You can't be mean. Like, I was like, you guys are game playing. I was like, you don't want, I told him, I said, I have a feeling that this is coming from above you, but you don't want to continue practicing this way because your name is getting around in the plaintiff's bar and people aren't thinking too highly of you. I was like, trust me, I'm a lot farther along than you are. And I'm telling you, reputation is key. Then I reached out to him because they had filed motions to compel against me because I didn't give them further responses in 2 days. And I told them I was going to give it to him by next Friday. I was like, hey, tomorrow's a school holiday. I'll get you what you want. You're just not going to get it in 2 days. You're going to get it by next Friday. Well, that following Wednesday, they filed motions to compel with sanctions. And I called and I was like, really? And he was like, Ash, I know. I'm going to talk to my boss. So I sent him another email. Hey, what's going on with this? Do I need to oppose it? What's going on with this? I assumed, just like you said, I took it personally. I was like, oh, wow, that whole conversation we had about professionalism went through one ear, out the other. And I sent him an email and I was like, I thought we had an understanding. Why are you doing this again? I got an email from him yesterday that said, Ashley, I'm terribly sorry. I am battling the worst case of COVID. I'm just now coming through it. What is your deadline? And I was like, I'm so sorry. And the whole time I was totally taking it personally. I was like, here he goes again, being a jerk. When he was sick.
Yeah.
So you can't take that stuff. You're totally right. You don't know. You just don't know.
And, those are types of things where we have to realize everyone's stuck in their own little world. Everyone's stuck in their bubble, especially now during COVID, where, social interaction is so much more limited than it was before. And sure, we have things like Zoom, FaceTime, but it's not the same feeling someone's energy in person. And I just wanted to segue a little bit to the fact that, like, as parents, we're constantly juggling a million things. We have to
Yeah.
think about, our children's future. We have to think about our careers. We also have to think about our personal lives. And honestly, we can't truly take care of another human being if we don't take care of ourselves first.
Amen, sister. Thank you.
Right. And don't feel guilty doing that. So there is this lady, she's actually an author now, but she was a palliative nurse, and her name is Bonnie Ware. So she wrote a book about the top 5 regrets of the dying. And I think that it makes sense to reflect back on this every once in a while when you're so stuck in your zone, when you're thinking, oh my God, this COVID thing is never going to end. But honestly, COVID is taking lives, and therefore we really should reflect upon our lives and the bigger picture, what really matters. So one of the big regrets is, I wish I had the courage to live a life true to myself, not a life others expected of me.
You're saying live your life for you.
There's always going to be a comparison. You're going to compare whether, a mother can juggle, having the 7-figure income and parenting 2 children. But no,
Who have perfect houses. I'm like, how in the world are you able to keep your house so tidy? Like when my kids are there, like it's so funny. Like on the few, I've had 2 weekends since July that my daughter has not been with me. And during those weekends, by Sunday night, my house looked amazing. And then both kids come over and Cody leaves the snacks here. And it's like, I finally look at the house by Thursday night and I'm like, I can't. And I had to do exactly what you were saying. I was like, you know what, Ash, let it go. If there's a fruit roll up, wrapper on your ottoman, it's fine. Like tell Cody to pick it up and throw it away. You don't have to get so stressed out about it. I was comparing myself to other moms I thought were doing it better.
Right. And you also have to think about yourself. Like, when you're super wrapped up in your work, when you're wrapped up in parenting, are you taking care of the things that you're passionate about? Like, just because we're lawyers doesn't mean we don't have, a creative side or an artistic side. Take time to, explore photography if that's something that interests you. You still have to nurture the things that interest you and don't feel bad about it.
Do you do that, Diane?
I do.
How do you carve out? Here's the thing, right? Like, because I read about that. And then I noticed that in reality, when I got up in the morning and I had the kids ready by a certain time, Zoe got picked up to go to my mom's, Cody came to the office with me. Before I knew it, after bedtime, I'm exhausted, I'm spent, and I never made the time. So I had to actively, I found that if I organized my day, like my son, for example, has to still wear uniforms, even though he's virtual learning, whatever. If I made sure that I had those uniforms, washed and dried, like for whatever reason, y'all can judge me if you want to. My son has this thing about being in his underwear. The minute he comes home, he strips off his clothes and he sits in his underwear. And when we had the tutor come over, I'm like, Cody, dude, you're naked. The tutor's here. And he was like, don't worry, Mom, I got this. And he would go get a blanket off the couch and wrap it around himself like a toga. Like, Cody, that is not appropriate. And then finally I was like, you know what? Screw it. You're 9. If you want to live your life in your underwear and it is 50 degrees outside, you go ahead, but you do you. You do you, right? Yeah. But what I realized, with that was if I found that I had Cody's uniform ready to go the next morning, I had the snacks already packed from the night, the more organized I was with my day. And then I would literally get up in the morning and I had a planner and I would plan the day out. And I was like, you know what? We're going to wind down for bed at 8 p.m. And if Cody wanted to be with me, I told him, dude, I'm going to read a book. You can read a book too. I bought you some new books here. There, we'll sit together and we'll read together. I had to schedule in that time for self-care, right? You got to do that stuff, but you got to force yourself to do that self-care or you won't. And I know, at least for me, like I will get totally, when I'm overwhelmed and especially if I'm tired, I can't cope with the world. So I know, at least for Ashley, like Ashley needs 7 to 8 hours of sleep. Some people can operate off of 5, 6 and feel fine. That's never been my jam. I wish it was. It's not. So I make sure I get 7 to 8 hours of sleep a night, to make sure that I can.
So important. I don't usually get that much sleep at night, but let me tell you, when my head hits the pillow at night, I'm like knocked out. It does not take me long to fall asleep. But that reminds me of another one of the main regrets of the dying, and that is, I wish I hadn't worked so hard. So if that's one of the main regrets of the dying, you really have to realize, like, sure, we all have to work to pay the bills. We all have to work to feed our families, but you have to also rest. Just like when you're training for, an athletic competition or something, you can't train nonstop and not give your body a rest. We've sort of evolved to deal with short-term bursts of stress, running away from danger, for instance. But our bodies really aren't adapted to dealing with prolonged, continuous stress, because it raises cortisol, which is the stress hormone, and continuous elevated levels of cortisol will lead to inflammation, and you're essentially breaking down your body. So you have to forgive yourself if you have off days. You have to let yourself take an entire day where you don't do anything once in a while if you want to, and not look. Yeah,
Girl,
I did it recently.
Me too. And when I, occasionally on a Saturday, because if I have the kids, like they still do, it's kind of like social distance sports, but they still do it. When I don't have them, and I'm like, okay, this is great. I'm gonna get so much work done today. And I wake up on Saturday and I'm like, I'm tired. And I have to tell myself it is okay to take a day of rest. You are not going to feel guilty if you want to clean your house, take a bubble bath, read a book, and watch 5 episodes of Goliath tonight. It's okay. That was my Saturday. I would literally stayed up till past midnight watching Goliath. But by Sunday, I felt so much better. Like I needed it to recharge. But you also said something else that was really interesting. You said that we are not made for prolonged periods of stress. And I have recently learned that is a huge problem with the pandemic, because right now people are living in kind of like a survival mode. And I forgot what my therapist called it. There was actually a term that was coined for this condition, but it basically was the same thing as people going into overdrive, and like basically your surge protector like is starting to spark, like that thing's about to go out, because we are pack animals, we are social animals, we are not created to be socially distanced, we are not created to be sitting on our houses. We can do it, but we can only do it for so long, because that is considered our survival mode. Well, we've been on survival mode for what, almost a year now? And she said this is why the mental health rates are shooting through the roof. Like she was actually being forced by Kaiser to discharge some of her patients that were technically quote unquote stable, meaning they weren't getting better or worse, because there was not enough there are not enough therapists to meet the mental health needs right now. And she was struggling with that. So you're right. We are not created as human beings to go into this elongated survival mode that actually will wear down not only your physical health, but your mental health. And people don't give credit to how the two are completely related, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And obviously I'm not a medical doctor by any means, but I mean, this is backed by science. I mean, having elevated levels of stress hormones it's going to break down your body. So you have to really think about the long-term picture too. What do you have if you don't have your health? So you really have to take a step back and think about your own wellness. And for me, sometimes that's, taking a 10 or 15-minute break to meditate. I think a meditation practice is a very smart idea. I have, listened to a bunch of podcasts, read a bunch of books, and a lot of high performers have some sort of meditative practice. And what that traditionally incorporates is a breathing technique. So there are different, ideas out there about the proper breathing techniques. There's one called the Wim Hof breathing method. And essentially you just want to take deep diaphragmatic breaths. 30 or more typically have the ability to lower your stress levels, lower your cortisol, and sort of have a reset. And I think that that helps. If you're walking into a trial, you're probably stressed out, you're probably nervous. And that's a really great way to just relax. And all you need is a little bit of solitude. You can go to the restroom and do this.
Oprah Winfrey does that, by the way.
Right.
She meditates in a bathroom stall. Yeah. I think that's so gangster.
Whatever it is. Yeah. And sometimes it's like, even if it's your kids that are like knocking on your door and just driving you nuts, maybe you just need to lock yourself in a closet.
I've done it. I swear, I've done it. I have totally locked myself in my closet. Yeah.
Right. And don't judge yourself for that, because we all need it. And we all need to reset and bring that cortisol back down. And, speaking of, you had mentioned that we're social creatures. And so that's why this whole pandemic has really taken a hit. Well, another, big regret of the dying is I wish I had stayed in touch with my friends. So that's something that I really feel is critical to, successful parenting and successful entrepreneurship as a parent. You have to have a support group. And I personally have had friends, longtime friends, that have just fallen off the radar. And I've sort of been intentional in that regard, because I've noticed that some friends, just can't be supportive.
I was going to say that. Yeah.
They're not happy for your wins. Right. And that is based, again, not taking things personally. That is obviously a reflection of their own business, their own insecurities.
Which some people just may not be on the same path that you are, or their path may be so different that it's not healthy for you. And I'll give you an example. I think this pandemic has done this for a lot of people, where we've almost been taken to a place of forced reflection. And I know, at least for me, some of the changes that I've been making have been very uncomfortable for some people. And I've even had friends that I have sort of created distance with come back around because they're now realizing this. I had to create distance from some people because they associated with other people that I knew were not healthy for me and not supportive.
Right.
In terms of what I was trying to do. But I write a gratitude list every morning. I always start my day off with gratitude. It honestly, for those of you who don't do it, I would highly recommend it. It totally starts your day off in just positivity, and and it's part of the law of attraction and manifestation, right? So one of the things that I do is I write 5 things that I am grateful for that happened within the last 24 hours. One of which would be Cody's giggle. Cody has the cutest giggle in the world. Sometimes I'll just mess with him just to make him giggle so I can listen to it, right? Or, Zoe might have told me a really good joke or sent me a super funny TikTok video or something, right? Just little things that bring me joy. And then I write 10 things that 10 dreams I have, but I write them as if they've already happened. Because it turns out in manifestation, when you think a thought, your body actually does not know the difference between what you're thinking and actual reality. It sends out the same energy. So if I write, and one of the things I write every day is, I am grateful for a healthy tribe. And what I mean by that is I am grateful for a group of friends, but my group of friends are all very healthy people. We want similar things. We are not in competition with each other. There is no judgment. We're very supportive of each other, and we genuinely care about each other. Some of the tribe members that I consider to be part of my tribe are from JHQ, because one of the things about JHQ is that we legitimately, or it seems as so, we legitimately want the best for each other. So I personally practice this idea that we have to be very careful when you are on a path to success of who you let in your group. Because if I complain to you, Diane, and I'm like, oh, my life sucks, this happened, that happened, you will oftentimes say yeah, and you'll put a twist on it, like a little positive spin on it, right? Which kind of
all about reframing.
Yeah, it's reframing, and it kicks me out of that woe is me, and I'm like, oh yeah. So gratitude is huge. And then the second thing I practice that really, really helped me, because man, when I like spin out of control and I go down a rabbit hole, like I'm at the bottom with the bunnies that weren't even born yet. Like that's how deep I get, right? Is awareness. Like I do this thing. It's for those of you who don't know her, Rhonda Burns, she wrote The Secret. That book was introduced to me by Catherine Lizardo. And then I went and watched the documentary, and I recently read her new book called The Greatest Secret. And she talks so much about this, about awareness. And it's essentially, you know, I don't want to oversimplify it, but I don't want to complicate it. But the idea is that your mind and your thoughts are not actually you. And one way to, you know, crawl out of that is to just simply be aware of your thoughts. It's like if your thoughts are here, your awareness is here. And so what I do when I start to feel bad, I'm like, okay, are you being aware? And it puts me up here where I'm looking down at my thoughts, I'm looking down at my mind, and I'm like, okay, it's not so bad. It just kind of puts things in perspective. It's not so bad. So when I practice awareness and I practice gratitude, it's like an instant reset. And it also really helps with the overwhelm. Because the things I'm finding overwhelming, really, maybe they're not so overwhelming. Maybe they just feel overwhelming to me at that moment.
Exactly. And everything is relative. You know, I was talking to a friend recently. Yeah, I was talking to a friend recently, and you know, he was saying like, "Oh my gosh, I just realized that I've been on auto pay for some weird like audio book program, and it's been charging me a few bucks a month for the last 2 years. Oh my gosh, that's like losing $200 over nothing." And I thought to myself, okay, yeah, I can see how that would be obnoxious, but at the same time, be grateful for the fact that $200 is not a lot to you. You know what I'm saying? Like 200 bucks is so little that you didn't even notice it go, right? So it's all relative. There's always a way to reframe. And like you're talking about the whole gratitude thing, I absolutely believe that, because if you aren't grateful for the present moment and you're always waiting for this next step before you allow yourself to be grateful, you are always going to be chasing a moving goalpost. And for example, I had a vision board in my home office, and that on that vision board, I actually put a photo of like an office where I could like bring my dogs and everything. And I actually have my dog sleeping on the floor next to me right now. But you know, that was on my vision board, and I was shocked when I actually happened to make it a reality. It just happened that way. It's hard to even explain. I was so excited when it happened, and I was so happy. But now that I'm here and I have my office, I have noticed I've gone back, you know, now I'm used to this. This is my new reality. And now I'm chasing the next reality. You know, so if you're not grateful and realize, holy crap, like I accomplished something that I never would have thought I could accomplish within a year, and I made it happen in that year, like then you're always going to be chasing something, and you're never going to be grateful for what you have. So if your goal is to net, I don't know, $300,000 this year as a PI attorney, well, once you achieve that, your next goal is going to be to net 500,000, and then 800, and then a million, and so on and so forth. And you're always going to be hungry for more if you aren't taking time to look at your present moment and enjoying the journey and being grateful for every step.
You said something that is really important too, and that is you can draw from what you've done in the past, right? So if your goal is to net $300,000 this year, you could look at it and say, hey, I wanted to manifest an office, and look at it. If I can do that, what can I do next, right? Because our baseline is your baseline. When you increase your baseline never goes back down. Jesse, is it Itzler or something? He's married to the woman Sarah Blakely, who created spandex or whatever.
Oh yeah, you mentioned him.
Yeah. He has this program. I think it's called 29029 or whatever. He like basically rents mountains, and they're all the same height as Mount Everest, right? So when you climb these mountains, it's like having climbed Mount Everest, right? The reason he does this is, and you can join his program to do this, and you climb with a lot of celebrities have done it. Rachel Hollis did it with her husband. But the idea being, if you do this, and you could say, I climbed a mountain that was the equivalent of Mount Everest, you have now raised your baseline in terms of what you're capable of, and your baseline never goes down. So he does these crazy things, right? Like he'll run this crazy marathon he's never ran before. He'll take a 5-minute ice bath just to prove he can do it to himself, so that it increases his baseline. So now, when something happens and I'm like, oh crap, this is a problem, I'm like, wait a second. Since last March, you not only moved your office out of your home and into Diane's office, you also managed to help your daughter raise her grades from D's and F's to A's and B's within 3 weeks. Even if you had to take all these steps to get there, you're not out of business. Your kids are fed, healthy, and still alive. You're managing a custody dispute, a contentious custody battle, while dealing with all of the, girl, this problem ain't nothing. Like, you can handle this. So I pull on the past now to say, you've survived this, this, and this. And it's so funny because people are like, oh my gosh, like the mental health sequelae from this pandemic is going to be reaching for years to come. And I'm like, yeah, but we're also going to look at ourselves like we are resilient as hell. Like, I want to come out of this thing going, damn, that was hard and it kind of sucks sometimes, but look what you did. And if you can do that, you can do this and you can do this. And my goals change, right? Like, and I really truly believe in manifestation if it's done properly. So one of the things that I did, and it's working, is I stopped focusing on what I don't have and I focus on what I want, right? So I don't focus on, God, I wish I had more money in my bank account, because then I'm focusing on the lack of it. I now focus on abundance and prosperity. Money comes easily, you know, and when you put the energy on the positive and not on the lack, like, the mind does not know the difference between what you're thinking and what the reality is. So your attention goes where your energy, or your energy goes where your attention goes. I don't focus on anti-war rallies. I want to focus on a pro-peace rally, and that's where your energy goes. So you can manifest the things that you want by putting your attention on the right things. And I think one of those things, hopefully, is resilience. When we come out of this pandemic, like, look what we've been through. Hopefully people will realize that their baselines are up, right?
Right. And that's something to be grateful for. You know, it's been a really difficult time for pretty much everyone, with the exception of maybe Zoom and like Amazon. This has been an incredible opportunity at the same time. A hardship always presents some of the most valuable opportunities. And this is also a really valuable opportunity to practice letting yourself be happy. And that is another one of the dying regrets of most people, is that they wish they had let themselves be happier. And so that is the key takeaway of that, is happiness is a choice, you know. And ultimately, you were talking about goals and how you constantly elevate your baseline. But at the same time, you have to realize, like, some people, for example, like Olympic gold medalists, once they achieve that, you know, glorious moment that they've been training so hard for, a lot of times they fall into depression afterward. You have to constantly evolve and understand that this is also a practice in letting yourself be happy. This is a practice in finding your purpose, and your purpose may constantly evolve, and that's okay. You and I both have aspirations beyond being attorneys, and that's wonderful, because we understand our purpose, and we've taken this time to introspect. And that's been one of the the great gifts of this pandemic and working from home or being isolated. While community is certainly very important, and also, might I add, there's studies of blue zones, basically very long-lived communities, and one thing they all have in common is a very close sense of community. But at the same time, when you're forced into solitude, like we kind of have.
What is a blue zone?
It's basically a study that was done on some of the most long-lived populations around the world. Typically, longer-lived populations have in common is that they have a very close-knit sense of community. Be grateful and appreciative for friendships where people are constantly building each other up, supporting each other. It's also important to take some time, to yourself, to reflect and to introspect and to think to yourself, is this my purpose? And when you think about it, like, we are healers in many ways. As PI attorneys, we're healers. I mean, why? Because we're helping make people whole again. We're doing that through monetary compensation, but this is helping, So is that your purpose? Is your purpose to heal others, to help others? Whatever it is, think about your why. Think about your why when you're struggling. And I know that we had talked about that a little bit earlier, Ashley. Sometimes when you're going through very difficult times, you have to remember your why. And this is a great opportunity to do it, like during this pandemic. Are you in this for the right reasons?
They say if your why is strong enough, your how will basically present itself, right? Like if you really want something bad enough, you'll know how to get it, even if something stands in your way. You will discover.
So the way I see it is start with your why. There's actually a book by Simon Sinek called Start with Why, I think it was. Every time you get discouraged, remember your why. Remember the clients that you're working for. Remember why, the dollar is so important for them and for their recovery and their healing process. And you may actually have the potential to completely change their lives for the better. So, we have such a privilege in our profession, and it's really, I think, important for us to reflect back on that and to be grateful for this opportunity and to let that drive propel you into growing your business. But at the same time, allowing yourself the time to recharge, and allowing yourself to ask for help, and allowing yourself to be vulnerable amongst the people that you trust. That is another one of the dying wishes, is that someone, a lot of people wish they had the courage to express their feelings, and this is the time to do it. I mean, so many people have unfortunately succumbed to this really scary virus. So if not now, then when are you waiting for? When are you waiting to tell your loved ones how you feel? And sometimes some of these feelings are so painful and so hard that you may even need to, draft really scathing letters to these people and write them by hand, and then burn them later if you have to,
Right.
But just get it out there. If you have to seek third party, advice, such as like a therapist or a counselor, then do it. And there's no shame in that,
More now than ever. More now than ever. There is absolutely no shame in seeking professional help. I do it on a weekly basis. Yeah.
And in that process, you're going to learn not to take it personally. You're going to learn that all those things that you felt wronged by, I mean, there's no reason to take it personally. At the end of the day, everyone is just trying to survive. Everyone's just trying to do their best the only way they know how, and some people are just a little bit more evolved in their way of surviving and coping and dealing with others, and others aren't. And we have to be forgiving about that. We have to not take that so personally. And we have to be willing to be vulnerable and open. So, ultimately, this is really a great lesson into just living without regrets, and having enough faith in yourself and confidence in yourself that your world isn't going to come crashing down if you open up your heart and are vulnerable to another person and you don't get the results that you were expecting. because ultimately you have to do that without any expectation of the people that you're opening up to.
Yeah, there's in the new Rhonda Byrne's book, The Greatest Secret, she talks about that, and it's this whole thing on attachment. Like the only reason that we get disappointed or let down or sad is because of attachment. Like the reason we get super upset when somebody breaks up with us is attachment. The reason we get very upset, she gave all these examples and how to reframe that attachment in your mind so that if something like that does happen, it doesn't derail you, right? Like you don't get the response that you want. It doesn't derail you.
And sometimes you have to realize that sometimes you're attached to your own story of what you thought it should be. Perhaps you were actually heartbroken because you were attached to this idea of what you thought this other person was. It's understanding the story that we create around everything. It's a story that we create around, oh my God, I'm such a failure as a parent. Oh my God, my kid is being a brat. Like, no, these are stories and they're based on how we're feeling in the moment. Right. I mean, I really thought for a second that my son was just going down this downward spiral. Yet months later, he's now qualified to be a GATE student, which is the Gifted and Talented Education Program. So he's like, I don't know, in the top 98% of students, and I'm incredibly proud. But just a couple of months ago, I was worrying that my kid was becoming a delinquent, So everything's just relative. And you also have to let your kids learn. You have to let them fall, and you have to let them pick themselves back up, because we have to do the same as adults. And one thing I definitely want to add is that during this pandemic, my son learned how to skateboard, and he's actually been so adorable because he's been teaching me how to skateboard. And when I first got on a skateboard, I was so petrified. The balance was just all off. I thought I was going to break every bone in my body. But he said, Mom, you have to learn how to fall. He says, once you learn how to fall, you realize it's not that bad. And then you just get rid of your fear and you can keep going.
Isn't that powerful?
Yeah. So maybe this is an opportunity for us to learn how to fall, realize it's not that bad. We can always get back on.
I love it. Diane, thank you so much for joining us today. I appreciate your time. I want to make sure that everyone can reach you. She does do personal injury. Have you expanded to include other areas formally yet, or was that informal?
Informally, I'm going into the family law realm as well. I also handle some unlawful detainers, but that's informal as of now.
Okay. So if you want to reach Diane, she is the owner of the law office of Diane Chang. She can be reached at diane@dianechanglaw.com. Again, I'm Ashley Lakin. I am the owner of Lakin Law Group. I can be reached at ashley@lakinlaw.com. Thank you so much for watching this week's edition of Justice HQ's Think Tank, sending you joy, love, and lots of success. Again, Diane, thank you. I will see you tomorrow in the office. Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you so much.